So let's dive right in. And for that, you of course should create another new Flutter project with the Flutter create command. Here I created a project called expense tracker with Flutter create expense tracker. And then attached to this lecture, you find a main.dart file, which you should use to replace your main.dart file in your project with, or simply copy the content of the attached main.dart file and replace your main.dart file's content with it. And also make sure you create an expenses.dart file, which at the moment will be empty because that is the file where I want to create my main user interface, or where I want to get started with creating that interface. And to get started, we of course, first of all, should take another look at that interface and at the core features we have there. And if you take a look at the finished app, you see that there are a couple of things on that user interface. In the end, we have that chart, and then below that chart, we have that list of expenses. But of course, we also have this bar, this toolbar at the top, you could say, which has this icon button which we can tap to open this modal overlay here, which then allows us to insert a new expense. So that's also something we'll have to add. Therefore, this expenses widget here, in the end, should give us these three main areas here on that starting screen. That toolbar, or app bar, as it's called in Flutter's world, at the top. Then below that, the chart, and then below that, the list of expenses. And we'll take care about the modal overlay and so on later. For that, in expenses.dart here, I'll create a new widget class, and I'll name it expenses. And this should actually be a stateful widget, which we build here, because of course at some point we want to start managing expenses, we want to start adding expenses, for example, and that then will of course require a UI update, because every time we add a new expense, we want to, update the UI to show that new expense in the list and to also update the chart. And since we have that list and chart, and both are part of that main expenses screen, which should be this expenses widget here, it's this expenses widget that should manage the data in a stateful way. Because you learned that we need a stateful widget if we have data which we want to change, and where those changes should then update the UI. Therefore here we extend stateful widget, as we did it multiple times before in this course, and you also must add this import to material Dart, of course. And in that stateful widget, we have this create state method, which we should add. And you also learned, of course, that stateful widgets in the end are widgets that are created with help of two classes. The first class is the widget class itself, and the second class is a state class, which is typically named underscore, and then your widget name, in this case expenses, state. And here we want to extend the built-in state class, which is provided by Flutter, which is a generic class where we basically have to tell Flutter which kind of state or to which kind of widget this state will be connected, and here that's the expenses widget. And in this expenses state class here, you then must add the build method, like this. And in the build method, we'll then of course return our widget tree. Now in the create state method in the widget class, we then should return a new instance of our expenses state, created like this. And we can also change this state here, or this type here, to be state of expenses, to be a bit more specific which kind of state we're creating here. With that, we of course also must add our constructor function here to the widget class, or we should add it at least. And it can be a const constructor. And at the moment here, I just want to forward that named key argument to the parent class. So with that, we got the basic widget setup for this expenses widget. And before we'll now start working on that widget tree that we want to return, we can therefore go back to the main Dart file and there import from our own package, from our own project here, without the typo. So import, and here my project is named expense tracker, and I want to import from expenses Dart and then set my home widget here to my expenses widget, which I can now use. And since there we allow for a const constructor and material app also supports const constructors, we can add const in front of material app. With that, we got that all set up, and now it's time to output something on the screen. For this here, of course, we have to return a widget in our build method. And for the widget that should be returned, I'll pick the scaffold widget here, which is another widget we used quite a bit before, because this widget does some general base style setup work, and it, for example, also sets the background color of the app to white. So here I want to return scaffold, and then add my body here, and set the body of this page here, of this screen, so to say, to a column widget. And I want to use a column widget here because in the end I want to have this chart above this list of expenses. So I want to have two widgets above each other, and that basically always means that you want to use a column, because that allows you to add multiple widgets above each other. So here we then set the child widgets of that column, so the widgets that should be above each other. And here we'll soon have the chart and then the list. For the moment, I'll just add some text placeholders, which will be replaced later. So here I'll have the chart, and this can be constant, or actually we can even add constant in front of this entire list. And then I have another text widget where I will have my expenses list later on. As mentioned, these are just placeholders, of course. Now if we run this application, here again on an Android emulator in my case, we should have this white background and also this text here squeezed into the top left border, but of course we'll change the styling soon.